Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Lindsay, a member of the CK-12 team, and my colleague Katie and I will be running today's webinar, all about CK-12's adaptive practice. We're so glad that you've joined us. Before I introduce you to CK-12, I'd like to go over a few logistics about the Zoom webinar platform to make sure everyone is comfortable using the different windows. Right now, you should see two different options on your Zoom screen, one that's for Q&A and one that's for chat. During today's presentation, whenever you have a question about CK-12, please post it in the Q&A window. Our presenter will pause for a Q&A session after each major topic to address any questions that have been submitted. The chat window is more of a place for a community conversation. We'd love for you all to introduce yourselves. If you're an educator, feel free to share where you live and the subject that you teach. Just make sure in the chat window that you're sending any general posts to everyone and not just to CK-12 or the panelists. So let me repeat that real quick. You see that little option where it says to everyone? If you do just to panelists, not everybody's gonna see that. So community conversation for everyone, questions for us, please leave them in the Q&A option. And while we don't anticipate any technical issues during our broadcast, if you're having any trouble with your video or your sound, just let us know in either of those windows. So now that we've gone over the logistics for the webinar, let me introduce you to the CK-12 Foundation and then to Katie. The CK-12 Foundation, founded in 2007, is a leading nonprofit organization dedicated to improving student learning by increasing access to educational materials through the Flexbook platform and concept-based modalities. CK-12 offers free, high-quality, standards-aligned, open content through an integrated set of tools for learning, including digital textbooks, concept-based learning resources, simulations, interactive practice, and more. And we give it all away for free. Our core content and curriculum is for middle school and high school math and science, with some K-5 math practice and videos, and new science books. However, with the addition of donated resources and user-created content, you'll also be able to find books for other subjects and levels, especially related to social studies and English. A lot of people are surprised to find out that our website is run by a small team of about 35 people located in Palo Alto, California. We have a few colleagues working outside of California in our India office. We're some of the most passionate people that you will ever meet. We love what we do, and we're thrilled to give people all around the world access to quality content and resources. One of these passionate people is Katie. Katie is an experienced classroom teacher and a CK-12 math specialist who will tell you everything you need to know about adaptive practice while pausing periodically to answer any questions you might have.
Thanks, Lindsay, and thanks to everyone who joined us today. In this webinar, I'll be covering the following topics: CK-12's adaptive practice system that includes the 150,000 plus questions that we have that adapt to meet students where they are. Then next, we'll talk about customizing practice in CK-12 quizzes, whether structuring practice with specific questions or writing your own. And lastly, tracking student progress in our groups feature and seeing answers and all the different components that go with that. For each of these areas, practice, quizzes, and student reports, we'll describe the what, why, where, what it is, why you should use it, and where you can access it, and then go into the tool itself so you can see it in action. Our main goal is that by the end of this session, you feel excited and equipped to use CK-12 practice, quizzes, and reports with your class. But before we get into the core content of the webinar, it would be great if we found out a little bit more about you. You'll see a poll here in a few seconds that will prompt you to respond to 2 questions. Knowing both of these will help us tailor this webinar and deliver the most relevant content to you. The first question is to get an idea of how familiar you are with the practice tool. It'll tell us how in-depth we should go with the particular tools in the webinar. So let us know if you're new to CK-12's adaptive practice, you've used it occasionally, or you use it frequently. The second question is regarding learning management systems you may be using in your schools and districts. Please let us know if you are using any of the following: Blackboard, Canvas, Edmodo, Google Classroom, Schoology, some other learning management system, or that you're not using any. You're allowed to select more than one LMS when answering this poll. If your school or district is using an LMS that isn't listed, feel free to choose Other and tell us in the chat window the name of the system you are using. I'll pause for a few seconds to let you finish answering this poll.
Katie, we have the poll launched, but somebody just said they're having trouble with it. If you're having trouble answering this poll, no worries. We're going to close out that window in just a couple of seconds anyway, thanks to those of you who have locked in your answers. So we're going to give it just a few more seconds, and then Katie will let you continue with the presentation.
Great. We'll pause there and continue on. So our team will review the answers and help direct this conversation based on responses. Now let's move on to the core content for this week. You can get to any of our content and tools by going to the CK-12 homepage using the web address www.ck12.org. As you can see, we offer a number of options to access our content, from searching at the top of the page, to if we scroll down, you can jump directly into our interactive simulations or PLICs, our practice, or materials that schools have published on our site. So those are all options that you have to go directly into that tool. Below that are the links for the major branches of content. These include topics for math and science, as well as some for English and a couple of other subjects in the process. If you were teaching, let's say, chemistry, you could go into that particular branch. So let's do that now and see what it shows up. Here you'll see our concepts and our flexbooks. So many people know us as a flexbook company, and you can find those free customizable textbooks on that tab. However, we have moved beyond textbooks to concept-based learning. So let's go back to our concepts tab. All the resources for that can be found in the initial concepts tab. If we scroll through this content, you'll see all of the concepts related to chemistry, and then those major headers are in black. Let's go into one of them, let's say decomposition reactions. And that will take us to the concept page. Here you'll see our featured content at the top, and then other content such as CK-12 and community contributed down below. In order to use these, students are encouraged to explore and learn through the various modalities, and all they have to do is join or sign in. Now you can do this quickly using Google, Facebook, or your own email address, and this allows us to keep all of your work in one place in our system while you get full access to everything CK-12 offers for free. So as you saw when we looked at the chemistry concept, there are a number of different ways to learn, including our core modalities. These are text, simulations, our interactive PLICs, videos, practice, and even real-world applications. Today we're focusing on practice, so let's begin exploring that.
Yes, let me give you the what, why, and where of adaptive practice. So what is it? Adaptive practice is a digital assessment tool that adapts to student input. CK-12's adaptive practice system, it's this digital tool that's designed to meet students at their current level of understanding and help them master the next step for any concept. Because of that, our system will bump students up to available harder questions if they're successfully answering, or make recommendations such as a text to read, a video to watch, or an interactive to work with. Why should you use it? We give you access to 150,000 questions and reports on assigned work. So there are a variety of question types, from multiple choice, select all, true, false, short answer, and our newest fill in the blank, drag and drop into categories, and highlighting. When students complete work and click submit, they'll be able to see information such as the time they spent, their streak, the number of easy, medium, and hard questions they completed. Note that because our adaptive practice system meets students where they are, a student who is struggling may hit the goal of 10 correct with all easy questions, and a student who is more advanced would have more of a mix of levels. So where do you get it? In addition to the website, there's a free CK-12 app available for all smartphones and tablets. This tool provides the ability for students to practice at their own pace on any electronic device, whether in school or on the bus, on the way to something like a game. But Katie's going to take over here and break it all down for you and show you some demonstrations.
Great, thanks, Lindsay. I'm going to steal my screen in a second, but I know someone posted that they only saw the option for panelists in the chat window. Zoom has updated their stuff to be not everyone, but all panelists and attendees. So if you're looking to kind of share information within chat for everyone, use that all panelists and attendees option as you go through from there. But with that, I'm going to share my screen so we can actually go into CK-12 and see what that looks like. So here, the first question is, where do you find this practice? So you can find this within any particular concept. So we did chemistry, so let's pick a different topic at the lower level. And these are some of the ones that I've chosen as subjects, but if I wanted to show all subjects, I could simply do that. Click grades 1 through 5. And then if I was teaching a unit on, let's say, time for grade 4, I could go into that particular concept within grade 4. And just like I showed you for the chemistry concept, you'll see the different content options available. So in this case, a Plix, a video, and assessment. If I click on the assessment or the practice option here, I then have the option as a teacher to do a couple of things. So option A, I can assign to class using this orange assign to class feature on the top left. And that's true for modalities across our site, not just practice. I can add it to my library, share it to groups. I can even customize or create new questions. And we'll talk about that customization piece in the next section of this webinar. But here I could preview this particular option right from this modality page. The other way to find practice, if I wasn't going through a concept, would be to go back to our homepage. And this lovely CK-12 icon on the top left will get you back to that homepage. So if I go back there, and as I showed you guys at the beginning, we have these explore different types of tools. So if I click on adaptive practice here, I can then pick a topic. So I taught high school math, let's say algebra here, and then numerical expression evaluation with operations. You'll notice in a couple places that you see percentages. Those are what a student would see as well if they'd started a particular concept. So if I click on that, because I didn't access this from the concept page, those other modality options are available right here for a certain student to use and learn and understand even before they jump in. As a teacher, I can also customize this or download this as a worksheet to share with my class. But let's go in and see what that practice looks like. Lindsay mentioned that it was adaptive. And so what does that mean? So if I start here, and a student is doing well, so if I did out this problem, 24 divided by 6, get 4, 12 times 3 is 36, 30 minus 2, 28, and see it popped up a hint to help a student that might be struggling. And then I did part of that math incorrectly, so I got an error as I went through. I can click next and get to the next one. You'll see a hint here. A negative sign represents a value deficiency, so students can use those hints to help them understand what's happening. If I get it right, as I go through here, it will mark that correct as I work my way through. The more questions that I get correct as a student, the system will serve up more like harder available questions to that student, so it will continue to challenge them. If a student starts doing this and just randomly typing in numbers and guessing, then at some point in time, the system will actually pop up recommendations for that student. So you'll notice this is starting to flash red. It says maybe you might want to start thinking about what's happening. And then it will kick in and pop up some recommendations. So I could watch this video, real world application, check out this read, or return to the practice as I was working through. The one other thing you know is that there's a scratch pad here. So if a student wanted to work this out, 2 times 5, you could do 10 squared plus 6, and use the scratch pad to help them do that work. This is particularly useful if they're using a mobile device, whether they're doing homework on their phone or a tablet. When they're done and they click submit, you'll then see how they're doing. So in this case, I got 3 correct. I had gotten 1 correct when I was doing practice earlier. I didn't really get a streak of questions right, and I only spent 5 minutes doing a bunch of questions. And my skill level was at the point where I was being recommended to read other pieces and kind of help learn that material more. I scrolled down below, I could actually see the questions. I answered 3 out of 16 easy questions correctly, and because I wasn't doing so well in that, it wasn't serving up kind of the medium and harder questions as I went through. Below that, the students, and you'll see this in the teacher version as well, can see the questions they got right, the questions they got wrong, and how they were doing. Now the goal for that to get 100% correct on this particular thing, this 30, is 3 out of 10. And our practice tool is really that idea of meeting a student at their level of understanding and encouraging them to go that next level. So really trying to help them be successful and work their way through and understand what's happening from that point. So hopefully that gives you an idea of how our practice system works. As Lindsay mentioned, there are other types of questions. There is multiple choice, fill in the blank, categorizing. So depending on the topic and the questions that you're working with, you might see those different pieces.
Okay, so now's the time when we would like to pause for a Q&A. We currently don't have any questions lined up, so I want you guys to think about what Katie just presented and why you're joining us for the session today and what your needs are at your own school or your classroom, or we've got some parents on who have students and they're wanting to get them started with adaptive practice. So if you guys want to start asking some questions in the Q&A, we'll get those answered.
So I know if we have parents, one other awesome resource that we can work with, I'm going to actually go back to close out of this practice for a second and go back to our homepage. And you'll start noticing this little BrainFlex guy up in the top left. That's a great summer program for kids to work with to help them kind of refresh those skills and keep their math and science skills up and ready to go for the fall. So that might be something that might be particularly useful for parents to use with their student or kids, or for teachers or schools to say, we encourage you guys to kind of go in and sign up your students and help them through that couple of month break and have them ready to go for the following year.
Great. Okay, Katie, we just got a question in that says, if you customize the practice, will kids see recommendations show up if they do poorly? Or can you review answers if you customized a practice?
Sure. So there's a couple of pieces in this question. So the kids will see recommendations as long as it's still tagged to that concept. So if you built a practice from scratch, and we'll talk about customizing in just a minute or two, so you'll be able to see that as well. But as long as it's still tagged to that concept, they'll be able to kind of see the similar pieces. If you're customizing it into a quiz, it loses the adaptive component. But it's still tagged to that concept. So they can go to that concept page and see all of those resources as it works through, but it won't have the recommendations pop up in the same way. In terms of answers, they'll still see the full set of answers when they've submitted their work, and they can work their way through.
Okay, so a couple of other questions. Did you say that a set of questions can be downloaded and printed to be used in the classroom?
Yes, I did. So if we go back to that, let's pick a different topic for here so that you guys get to kind of see across different options. So if I go down here, let's pick a science topic this time. So if I go to expand this here and maybe pick life science, we could go into a couple of different options. You can also just search from here. Let's say I was teaching a thing on ecology. I could pull up those different pieces. I could then find ecosystems. And if I went into that practice from this page, you'll see the option to customize it here, create new questions, or download as a PDF or HTML. One thing you should know about downloading, if you're downloading our practice, the system will randomly generate a set of questions for that practice worksheet. So you might want to download it and save it and be able to use it for multiple students. If you created a quiz that was customized, then when you downloaded it, it would match that particular piece.
Okay, so the next two questions, I'm almost thinking that we should tackle here in a little bit, because we're going to be addressing this in the upcoming sections of the demonstration here. One is asking about assigning practice to students of how they're going to access it, and then also somebody who's asking specifically about Clever. And I think that these are both going to be demonstrated here shortly.
Yeah, we'll be talking about accessing practice in the assignments part, which is part 3 of this webinar. And then we will touch on learning management systems and other ways to kind of access and both CK-12 and practice through that kind of right after that. So we'll pause on those and show you those. And if we don't answer your question in that section, then please feel free to post that question again or kind of fine tune what you're looking for specifically.
Okay, well, with that, I'm going to take back over the screen here, and let's start talking about quizzes. And so, again, with our quizzes, what is it? Well, if you want to tailor your assignments for students, you have the option to customize CK-12 practice into a quiz, whether or not you want to use it as a quiz. You should note, however, that when you choose to customize our practice, the system will no longer incorporate the adaptive component of our practice, as we wouldn't want to override the specifics you determined for the quiz. And Katie just kind of spoke on that. Why should you use it? Quizzes allow you to customize and specifically choose the number of questions, or even the questions themselves, that you want the students to complete. You can also set time limits, number of attempts, access to hints, and the order the questions appear. Whether used as a quiz or a tailored assignment, you can address particular goals you have for any class. And quizzes can be customized on CK-12. Once you assign them, students can access them on a computer, a tablet, or phone via the web or our practice app.
Great. Thanks, Lindsay, for that introduction. So we're going to look at a particular concept. I'm going to go back to sharing our live page and go back to our homepage. And you can kind of access stuff through here. But let's say I wanted to search not just kind of on that concept page, but for a topic as a whole. So if I was teaching a topic in physical science on, let's say, mass and matter, let's see our search options. And we have a concept called mass, matter, and volume. I can also filter by grade or by subject, but let's just jump right into that concept. And if I see here, we have the assessment option here. So if I click on practice, I can customize this practice from this page. And this will convert it into a quiz. So it gives you a little ready to make your quiz kind of introduction. And there's some super simple things you can do and then some more complicated things. So the first thing I'd want to do is title my quiz so that when it's in my library later, I know what I'm looking for. So demo for webinar 417, the 18th actually. And I can change a couple of things. I can have a student access this an unlimited number of times. So our adaptive practice system saves their progress because it's really just trying to encourage them to go back and learn and try some stuff out and from there. For a quiz, because some people are using it as an actual quiz, then they might only want a student to access it once. And in that case, they could set those number of attempts to 1 or 2, and the student would need to access it from beginning to end for that score. I can also set a time limit for the entire quiz, and I can choose to show hints, show solution, a note that kind of the elementary kids will see those solutions when they're working through. In the most case, you won't see those solutions for the high school, but there's a little bit the option to see those if you're working within the quiz. And then you can shuffle the questions so that even though students are all getting the same questions, they're getting them in a different order. So here you'll see mass, matter, and volume. There's one question right in here that I can put in. I can edit this. I could kind of see, oops, for 418. I can edit that and I can see what I'm looking at. And I can choose to include that question, or I could say maybe that wasn't really the particular piece I wanted. So I can add a new question set from a new concept. So let's say I wanted to add some different pieces from mathematics on volume. So volume has 5 questions here, but let's say I was working on, a couple different pieces. Let's choose volume of a sphere. And I can put that in there. Now, just like that, I can reorder the questions, or I can edit the questions within this particular part. Here, this is really similar to our flexbook editing. So if you've ever seen that particular piece in terms of the drag arrow options, I can rearrange questions. I can choose not to include a particular question. I can even toggle this down and see what that question looks like and how that would be presented to my students. So those are all options as you work your way through for kind of adjusting and adding different pieces. And then the last part that you'll see is the option to add a question. And this is if you wanted to write your own question and include it. So it's going to save my updates for that piece, and then it's going to bump us to our question editor. And this is a great tool for anyone that wants to kind of include their own questions. Here you'll see the different types of questions that you can pick from. So multiple choice, you see I have A, B, C, and D answer choices as my distractors for that piece. If I did true, false, it would switch those answer choices. For drag and drop, it says you want to change that. And then in this case, I would be adding different categories in here and then kind of putting information up here and putting that piece in. So let's see, test for categories. You can even use our math editor and get super nicely formatted equations if you're a math teacher, especially at the higher level. So feel free to explore that tool. And if you have questions on anything that I'm going through super quickly, please go ahead and ask us those as we go through Q&A.
Well, one question that you might be able to answer fairly quickly here, Katie, is you referenced the library earlier and that your quizzes go to the library. And we had a user ask, how do you organize your library to keep track of all these quizzes?
Okay, that would be probably through your folder system. And once I finish showing you this quiz piece, I'll make sure to jump to the library and show you that part. So let's just finish this up here for a second. I could say test for categories, category 1. And then I would highlight that and add it as an answer and then drag it into here. And I could say category 2 or category 2 and highlight that piece. And then that, clearly these are just adding different pieces from here. I could include hints if I wanted to include them, and then I could submit this particular piece. Anything that I'm adding, just like in your Flexbook, if you've been working with those, is going to show up at the bottom, just like it's the bottom of a table of contents. So if all the questions that I chose for this particular topic, right here, this test for categories question that I made shows up at the bottom, and then I could drag it wherever I wanted it to go as I worked my way through. So I'm going to save that piece, and I'm going to get bumped back to my main question screen. And here you'll see I can continue to add question sets. I can mix and match from math and science. I can write my own questions. But they're all options that, while eliminating the adaptive component in our system, allows you to specifically customize what you're working with. So let's go back from here. We're going to update that to include the changes I made. And then I can go back to practice. So now this is the regular practice. But let's go to the library and see where that shows up. So here you see the quiz demo for webinar 418. So if you wanted to edit that quiz, that would be one place that you could do it. And then we'll talk more about the groups feature and kind of showing that part as you worked your way through. But you'll notice that you could filter by type. So I could filter and just pull up all my quizzes. And so that would show up kind of different quizzes that I've demoed recently. Or I could create a filter, and I could manage folders, and I could write a folder that had all the quizzes for a particular class in there. So definitely options within your library as you're working. So I think that's kind of the basics of quiz creation and where you'd see them here. And so I think we'll pause and take some more questions. But this is just kind of that brief introduction, and then we really encourage you to go explore and ask more questions and come back and go from there.
Okay, so a question that came in, kind of back to this adaptive nature of a practice versus a quiz. Is it ever possible to keep the adaptive nature of a practice and customize? She says, sometimes I don't teach all the concepts in a practice, but want the adaptive nature of this activity. So can you customize practice without turning it into a quiz?
Sort of is the kind of short answer for that piece. What you can do, and the next section that we're going to go into in a minute has to do with assignments and groups. And so what you can do is you can create an assignment with multiple concepts in it. But the minute you start changing the questions themselves or picking a subset of that concept, then you really are bumped into the quiz role. because once you limit those pieces, then the system doesn't necessarily have enough components to work with to adapt to the varying student levels. But so I will show you that in a couple of minutes in terms of the, like, here's a particular concept and I want another concept added into that for one assignment. And each subset within that will keep the adaptive component.
Okay, then I was actually beginning to wonder if our chat window was working. So Roseanne got the chat conversation with everybody kicked off here. Others, please jump in. Again, chat would be great for some community conversation if you wanted to kind of share what you're working on in your classroom, in your school, where you're located. Q&A is a great place to post your questions. But this one that Roseanne just asked, I think she wants to see how, again, the library functionality, asking if you can delete this quiz or how that translates here.
Yeah, so in this case, we really don't delete stuff out of your library in the same way, just because you might, especially because our system is collaborative and anything you've published, others could share. Quizzes are a little different in that you wouldn't be publishing a quiz, they're really just for your class. But in this particular piece, I could actually archive this particular quiz. And now it's archived and it's not going to show up in the rest of my stuff. But if I wanted to see something that I archived, I would then be able to go over to that archived option and see different pieces. So I'm going to go back to my library, go from there, and I could pull it out of archived, but then it's not cluttering up your library because in this case, I didn't really need it as I was working through.
Okay, so the only other question kind of in the queue at the moment is, again, asking about Clever, which I think we're going to talk about all learning management systems here shortly. So if we could sit tight on that question, hopefully Katie's going to be able to answer that here in a few minutes for you. So if it's okay here, I think I'm going to move on. As we move on to the next section, I thought now would be a great time to share with you a just a short, it's like a 1.5-minute video of a classroom that Katie and I actually visited in Tullahoma, Tennessee not too long ago. And we've been traveling the country. It's CK-12's 10-year anniversary, which we often get the question from people, you know, how long have you guys been around? And are you going to continue to be around? And we're celebrating 10 years right now, and we're really proud of it. But we've been on a tour of the U.S. visiting different classrooms, and we were impressed by what this teacher was doing with elementary kids and adaptive practice. So if you want to check this out, and then we'll get back to more discussion and demonstrations.
I choose the CK-12 practice over a worksheet because it's just, the children are just so technology savvy these days, and that's what they would prefer over a worksheet. I like it because it grades it for me, so unlike a worksheet that I have to spend extra time grading as well.
It's a whole lot easier than keep writing and erasing.
What they're doing is I have gone in and I have selected the skills that I want the students to work with. It's not based on points, so when they miss one, they don't have to start over, or they don't have to do 15 to make up for the one that they missed. They don't know, but I know that they're going to see that same type problem again and have to get it correct before they're allowed to move on. So I like that about it. I know nothing's being skipped, nothing's being left out, and they're truly mastering that concept before they're allowed to move on.
If you get it wrong, it will pop up solution, and then it will show you how to work it.
I've introduced a new skill for homework during our flipped classroom. It's very intuitive for a teacher to be able to set up a group and then have students join. I have them grouped. Each class has their own individual group, which allows me to monitor what they're doing and see their results. And if they're online with what I feel like they need to be doing at this point, and maybe even things that I need to work with a little bit more with them individually or as a whole group. And then when they come in, it allows me to ability group them, and those who just need a little bit more, those are the ones that I usually send to work on CK-12, because they can get a repeat of the instruction through a video, and then they get extra practice as well. So that's one way I use it, and the other way I use it is to do a big unit review. So those are the two ways that I have found so far that best benefit me for math.
So she just previewed some of the topics we're going to be discussing about assignments. How do you get these to your students? How does the idea of a group play in here? And then what about reports? So Yeah, we mentioned briefly how to quick assign practice or other modalities to any CK-12 group, but we're going to go in depth here into the groups feature to learn more about assignments with multiple concepts and the reports you see on student progress. So what do you need to know here? What is it? Assignments are just that. It's something you want your students to complete. Reports allow you to see their progress on any assignments. You won't see progress on unassigned concepts so that your report isn't cluttered with other subject areas or random sections they may have tried out at any point. We'll tell you what that means here in a second. Why should you use it? Creating assignments allows you to see how students are progressing. Assignments for other modalities are simply whether they accessed text or video or got to play around in a sim sandbox or answer a question for a Plix. But for practice, assignments are general 10-question right goals based on student competency or specific questions requirements if you customize it into a quiz. So where do you get it? Major modalities can be quick assigned to groups from their page, and then assignments for practice can also be created from within groups. All reports are accessed through your corresponding class group on CK-12.
Great, thanks for that introduction. I'm gonna once again jump live to CK-12. We left off in our library, so let's go back to our homepage for a second. We've seen that quick assign option, so within the page itself when we were on the fourth grade or grade 4 time page. So let's talk about assigning from within groups and kind of what that means. So if I go to groups, you'll see kind of the actual groups that I'm in. You can access them from the groups tab or from your dashboard as well. So if you go here, you'll see kind of recommended subjects and then different groups that you might be a part of. And I'm going to do ones that I lead and that are specifically classes. And so one note, the difference between class and study groups is that study groups are available to share resources and discuss with others. But if you want to actually be able to assign work and see reports, you need to create a class. So if I go to Jumpstart Grades, this is a particular class that I've worked on. I have different assignments in here, reports, Q&A, shared resources. So let's go to the assignments option. And I want to create a new assignment for my class. So here we've done some math, we've done some science. Let's pick some spelling out of this piece. And let's talk about spelling rules. Now, this is a case where, let's say I wanted to customize it to include multiple concepts. So some about combining two words together in what's called the rule of simple addition, or any case where you add an ending, you double a letter. And I could actually include both of those concepts within here, and each one would maintain that adaptive practice component, but the assignment as a whole would include both of them. At the top, you can see the option to add a quiz to this assignment. And in that case, you'll see any quizzes that I've made, or I could create a new quiz because those are all in math and science and not spelling. Once I've done that, let's just put one that I've already created on here for ease of use on this particular piece. And I can click Save and say Demo for 418 and save that particular piece. Now, when I'm done, I could continue to update this, add any different pieces, pop out of it. And now if I was going to look at that particular assignment, so these are based on most recent due date. I could say ones that I want to assign to my class. So you can sort your assignments in this way. And you'll see that this has 3 different parts. It has the rule of simple addition, the twinning or doubling rule, and then that quiz. I could add a due date or change or delete this assignment. Now, one thing you should know is that if I use this assignment across classes and I wanted to edit it for one class, I would need to make a new assignment, because editing it here, if you notice this, it says changes made to the scope and sequence will be reflected across all groups. So that's just our warning that says if you're changing it here, you're changing it for all groups for this assignment. And I know we had some student questions in terms of like student accessing it. So let's actually assign it to this class. And then I'm gonna share a different screen. So let me do this. And this is a student screen for this particular piece. So if a student's logged into CK-12, they can go to their dashboard. And they can see latest assignments, group activity, kind of go through that piece. Someone, oh, look, there's a new assignment there. And they can actually start this assignment. You'll notice it has 3 parts to it, and they could actually start at any part and work their way through. And then that would pop up the adaptive practice that we were showing you earlier, in this case for the rule of simple addition. So that's one way students can access it. So they can access it through their groups feature or their dashboard through their CK-12 account. They could access it through our practice app, which we'll talk about shortly, or through a learning management system, which we'll talk about as well. But let me flip back to the teacher page so you can just see what that looks like. So that would be kind of creating an assignment with multiple concepts and adding a quiz in there so that you have the different parts, but you're not losing the adaptive components within any of those parts. Now, as a teacher, the other thing you're definitely going to want to be able to do is look at reports. So if I click on this reports option, you'll see your students as well as the different assignments that we've had. So we have a couple of students in here. If you haven't looked at this in a long time, we did switch that order so you could see your whole class vertically and kind of flip through assignments. You'll see Jumpstart's done a bunch of different pieces. The other people have done different components. And I have 2 options for accessing information from here. I could click on the whole assignment and see how people were doing here and then jump into individual pieces. Or I could click on a particular person and then it would take me to all of their assignments and what they were doing in that particular piece. And if I wanted to see how they did on any particular assignment, I can click on that assignment and I get the same information that I got before. That goal, their streak, the time they spent. Now this person spent 36 total seconds on this assignment. So the fact that they got a bunch wrong is not entirely surprising because I'm probably guessing that they were just randomly selecting answers. And then I can see kind of what that looked like and what their answers were. So those are all options for viewing assignments and drilling down into the particular pieces. And I can access that information from here within groups or starting a dashboard and going into any particular group.
Okay, so a question that came up kind of related to the last section that we were going to talk about is back to quizzes of how does the embed option in the quiz work? Does that allow me to place the quiz on my learning management system, which again is going to be the last part that we talk about here in a second, but what about embedding a quiz?
Sure, so if I go back to either the quiz page, so let me pull up in my library a quiz that I worked with, do the one we had shown here. Any quiz as well as practice, when you're on this modality page for that, you can see the option to create new questions, edit, or embed. If I click on embed, you'll see an embed code option here. This is exactly like an embed code that you would get if you were trying to embed a YouTube video into something else. So if you think about it like that and how you could use a YouTube video in another place, ours is put here specifically so that you could embed them within a CK-12 Flexbook. So if you're writing content and customizing content and wanted to include that, I could simply copy this code. And then when I was editing within a CK-12 Flexbook, I could paste that code into the little embed media option there. But you're welcome to use that same information within kind of any place that you can embed multimedia as you're working through on a system. Instead, you could also just use the URL at the top that would give you the direct link to this practice if you wanted kind of to link elsewhere. And then as Lindsay said, we're going to talk more about learning management systems and how that works in a minute or two.
Yeah, before we do that, we did have just kind of a general question about CK-12, which maybe should be addressed with everybody. It's how does CK-12 meet students' needs as it relates to the Common Core, performance-based assessment for especially math?
Sure. So if we go back to the homepage, there's kind of 2 ways that you can access content related to Common Core standards. One is to search for a standards-aligned flexbook. So if I was going to do that, I could say Common Core standards, pick a subject, let's say algebra, and a grade level, and then anything that had content that could be used within there might be showing up. So you'll see content related to Common Core for algebra and geometry, kind of depending on how the student was or the way your school was organized. So that's option 1 for accessing our flexbooks. The second option is back on the home page for a teacher. So if you're in the student version, make sure you switch to the teacher version. I've yet to meet a student who cares about standards specifically, but I could click on the standards and click on Common Core Math. And then what would happen is I'd come up to CK-12 standards browser. And in this case, I could pick a topic or area, grade 7, pick the matching content, so ratios in simplest form. It would take me to that page, and then I could assign that particular practice or assessment that was related to that topic that relates to the matching standard. So that would be how you could go about addressing standard-specific options within CK-12.
We had an interesting question that just came in about how students are outsmarting all kinds of systems these days. So the question is, are students able to search a particular adaptive practice and download the answers? I'm asking since I teach middle school, and some students will be quick to find the answers before doing the practice. So so how does that work with what the student sees and what the teacher sees with the practice?
So I think there's a couple of different ways to address this question, and it's one of the questions we get a lot throughout this piece. So the first thing is that they won't see the answers to the practice until they've done it. Now, that could be a question across different classes. Let's say you assign something to class period A, and then later on in the day, another class had a similar thing. If the kids were matching up, they could see kind of how the student was doing. So that might be a good option to kind of shuffle those questions, or make 2 separate quizzes where you're just picking and choosing random questions within there so that they get slightly different questions if you were worried about that. They can't download the answers to our adaptive practice system. For the questions within our Flexbooks, we try to make it available for students to check their answers, but that's one of the reasons why our practice system we highly encourage people to use, is that they don't see the answers until after they've done that part. Now, the second option for that is within the actual questions themselves, and we didn't touch on this much, but if I was going to add a question from here or create a new question, let me see if I can go from here. It'll pop up our questions browser. See if that's working. Nope, let's try doing it from here. I think our system is thinking. So let me go back one page and reset that for a second. And then if I edit this, oh, it's trying to do this. So demo with algorithms. So if I edit this piece right here, and I create new questions for this part, you have the option to create questions with variables in there. And I didn't cover this because it's kind of the next level piece within creating your own questions. But over here, that you have the option to make something a variable. So I could say, if x equals 4, what would 3x plus 5 be? And then I can make this part a variable. And I could choose from a set. I could say anything from 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. We have an alphabet. See if we can get that to add in there. Or I could just do a range. I could do 3 to 5. And I think they just updated this, so I will probably play around again with this for a little bit. But I could do, here we go, there's my range that I was looking for, 2 to 5 as my options, add in interval for 1, and go from there. Variable name should begin with X. I apologize for that. So as we're working our way through, we could have a different piece in here, and then what would happen is every time it worked its way through, it would actually serve up a different number within that. And so that's one way to get students across your class to have the same question with different numbers, so they can't use the same answer. So you're more than welcome to play around with our variables option, but I would definitely say allowing the adaptive practice piece means that they're served up the questions before they can see the answers as they work their way through.
Katie, we've had I think quite a bit of interest in some of the learning management systems. So why don't we go into that area? And I think Clever seemed to be the hot one that was mentioned. So, but why don't you just show our users how we do integrate and or where they can ask support if they have additional questions about integration, since this is just quick webinar.
So the first option, as Lindsay just said, support you can access from the right here, or help option at the top, and those will take you to stuff. So if you have any questions, definitely check that out. But if you scroll down to the bottom of your page, you'll see our tools and apps page. And this gives you the information on kind of all of the different tools and apps that we have in CK-12. So we have 3 apps specifically for CK-12 that we've built and designed. Accessing Flexbooks and Physics Sims, both offline and online, so that those are 2 useful ones. And then the practice app that came here. And I'll come back to this in a second because I know someone had a question about accessing on practice and their account, but hold off on that for 2 seconds. And then some other learning management systems specifically that we're integrated with: Google Classroom, Edmodo, Schoology, Canvas, Blackboard. Those are all options for kind of working as you work your way through. And those allow for, many of them, for grade pass back, so that you can kind of assign work on Schoology or Canvas or Edmodo and see the work that CK-12 offered to students, and then how they did on that particular assignment. So those are different kind of components and management systems that we integrate with. I know Clever and ClassLink, we do single sign-on. So if you were going to do that and you were logged into Clever and ClassLink, it would jump to your option right here. There's one little funky thing in terms of the question that we were being asked, which is if I log into Clever via CK-12, or using to CK-12 via Clever, then using the app for CK-12, I want to make sure that everything's synced up. So if you go up to your settings for your account, if you're logged in with Clever, you can always kind of add a username and password and then use that on your CK-12 app to link it to the same account. So that would be an option to kind of address I don't really want multiple accounts on my phone on there. I want them all linked to the same Clever login that I had from that piece. So hopefully that addresses your component from there.
Okay, so I guess we'll kind of leave LMSs there for a minute unless there's some other specific questions that come in. A few other questions related to practice and quizzes here. If you embed a quiz in a customized Flexbook, will the teacher be able to see their performance on the quiz, or should I just use the link at the top of the screen when I assign a quiz?
So that is one thing you should know, that if you're embedding content, so if I went to my library and I was either customizing a read for a particular topic or creating a brand new one, and I embedded a quiz within there, or I just embedded the practice within there, that is just as if a student accessed it if they were exploring our practice tool as we went through. So you need to, if you want to see kind of how they did on that, everything that you do needs to be assigned through the groups feature within CK-12, or for the 3 learning management systems that I just mentioned, Canvas, Schoology, and Edmodo, you can assign directly within them and you'll be able to see student progress there. So embedding it in a resource is great in that students can see it and access it right there. But if you want to see the report that goes with it, make sure to kind of assign it within one of those LMS or within CK-12 groups.
So what about a question of how do I share my lesson plan with another teacher at my school? And then there's a second part to that. I'll let you field that part first.
So the first part in terms of sharing, anything that you've made, so let's say we'll go back to our library for a second, and I want to do this piece right here. Your share options, is this little green share plane. So I could share, if you're using Google Classroom, you could type in an email and share that piece right here. I could share it on social media. So those are all options to share from that part. I can also create, one of the best ways within CK-12 is to create a study group of teachers. And then you could just click share to groups. And in this case, I could share it to a group, whether it's a class group or a study group. Let's say to Jumpstart, that was created as like a teacher collaboration study group, and I could share it there. And that way the teacher could see that particular resource within that group. So now if I go to that group on CK-12, so down here, my different groups options, let's do study group. Well, this was the newest one, so Jumpstart 2016. And then you'll see in the shared resources, over here, it's just loading my updated information. But in shared resources, I can sort by types of resources as well, or by who shared them within that group. So here, assessments, reads, other options, or I can click based on the member that shared that particular resource.
Katie, can a teacher that you shared a quiz with customize it for themselves?
So you can definitely take different options and customize them. You could start from the beginning again, or you could create a copy of that. And I haven't done that one in a while, so let me follow up with you on that one specifically in terms of the best practices for taking a quiz and making your own version of it and then going from that piece.
Okay, so we're gonna continue to leave. We're gonna leave the Q&A open, leave the chat open, and we wanna hear more questions from you guys, but I am gonna start to do some wrap up, some additional information here. So those of you who are needing to head off can head off the webinar. But I wanna thank you all for joining us today. And you know, the most important thing is that you just had a lot of information. Obviously, you guys need some time to digest it, and you just need some time to go onto the website and see which pieces of what we showed you today are relevant for you. And start small. Start by just getting your students to do some practice questions, and then add on layers of assigning it in groups and customizing in quizzes. Those are all extra things that we wanted to show you what's available, but really, I mean, start with the piece that's going to have the biggest impact for you. You know, if you haven't already, like, sign up, sign in, download our free apps, explore the practice tool as well as our content. And yeah, we just want you to jump in and try it out. So let me share the screen real quick because I want to show you guys some things that we have coming up. We're kind of winding down our school year, what we've called kind of our school year webinars, as a lot of our schools are getting ready to head into their summer sessions. But we have one more Everything CK-12 coming up on May 11th. And if you wanted to see more about Flexbooks and some of the other things you saw on the site that we didn't cover fully, Everything CK-12 is our survey on everything you ever wanted to know about CK-12. So you're welcome to join us for that. And then Katie and I are actually right now building our summer program. Last summer we ran a 6-week program for educators, and we're building something pretty exciting for you guys. So look for that coming up soon. This is the page that I was just talking about, Jumpstart. www.ck12.org/jumpstart takes you to what we did last summer, which has week by week lots of great videos, demonstrations, Q&A, things that can help you get some of your questions answered. Another great way to continue the conversation or to network with CK-12 users, or even get support from our staff, is to join the CK-12 Cafe. From our homepage, you can click on Cafe to see various forums for both students and educators. And I'd recommend that you all join the Jumpstart for Educators Cafe, and we're adding state-specific ones all the time. So see if your state is on there as well. Then we have, this is a really important part that helps us in knowing if we met your needs today with this webinar. So we have a feedback form, and that link is going to be put out here in the chat window for you all, and it's going to be emailed to you tomorrow as well. But this is a quick survey, just a few questions that if you could take the time to answer, that'll let us know how we did today and what we can do in future webinars to meet your needs. And then again, thank you so much for joining us. You are supported, our small team. We are on your questions all the time. We will ask each other across the room to get help and support for any of our users. So please use support@ck12.org if we can answer a specific question, or find us on all the socials at CK12 Foundation. So I think with that, those of you who need to sign off, you're welcome to sign off, and then we're gonna continue to go through the Q&A window. So I don't know, what do we have next here, Katie?
Thanks, Lindsay. Just a couple of notes as you know, we're wrapping up the core piece. If you are using any of those learning management systems, I'm happy to stay on and demo specifics for those pieces. So feel free to ask us. I just don't want to go through every little piece for something that no one is using. So definitely check that out and post in Q&A and I'll go through those pieces. We had one question that came in about the webinar being available. It will be up on our webinars page tomorrow. So definitely you're welcome to go back through and rewatch parts of it, shoot messages to support and ask us questions. And then we had a question about sharing lesson plans with another teacher at their school. So let me share my screen. And we're good to go from here. So I could share, let's say, anything from my library using the same options that I did for that particular piece. So I could go into a case study, and I could go to the updated version of that, and then I can share to a group option, or I can share using the same SharePlane there. If you've created a lesson plan using the lesson plan modality on CK-12, it would be the same concept from there. Additionally, every single piece on our website has a unique URL. So you'll notice the one at the top here includes this case study, lesson, all those pieces. I can share that URL in anything, you know, whether you put that in your own email to your friends, you could share it to Google Classroom, whatever that looked like. So there are plenty of options for sharing content on CK-12.
We have a request to talk about Google Classroom. This teacher says that we use Google Classroom. Any hints for using that?
Sure. So I'm actually going to show you what Google Classroom looks like over here as well. So let me switch to that page. So let's say I have a Google Classroom class in Jumpstart. I can see just kind of whatever I wanted to include for there. You'll see a life science option in here. But within CK-12, if I went over and I added, let's add a new tab, CK-12, and I wanted to share something to that class, I can actually share basically on many, many different page options on CK-12. But let's say I wanted to share something from physical science. So Bohr's atomic model. And then I went in here and I clicked this green SharePlane. If I'm sharing it on Google Classroom, you have three options. So first, choose your class. And then you can share it as an assignment, a question, or an announcement. And based on those different pieces, so if I created an assignment, it would then ask me to fill in the pieces that match that feature on Google Classroom. So title, instructions, due date, and link to that piece. Now, Google Classroom's ability to do grade passback was developed later than when we did this integration. So right now, if you wanted to see how a student was doing within practice on CK-12, you would need to assign that within a CK-12 group as well. Schoology and Canvas and Edmodo, you can see directly in that system. For Google Classroom, that is in the works but has not been developed at this time. So definitely assign it in both places. So that's probably kind of the one best practice I would recommend. But otherwise, it's super simple. Just click the green SharePlane and share directly to Google Classroom, and they can see whatever the piece is there.
So I think at this point, we're just going to sit tight for a few minutes and see what other questions come in. We've kind of cleared out the queue at the moment. So chime in if there's anything else that we can help you with before we sign off today.